And welcome back to the Filthy Liberal Scum Podcast. This is your host, Justin the Filthy Liberal Scum Rosario. We have with us once again, the Mike Murphy.
Hello again. And
Glenn Dewar, the Fat Smug Bastard.
Hello.
He didn't have anything nobody to come up with tonight. All right. Tonight we're taking a little bit of a detour. We're not going to be covering last week's news. We're going to be covering it's Poop on the Polls Day. I've decided that I want to make fun of Ron Paul, Rand Paul, and libertarians all over the world. Why? Because they deserve it, and they have it so richly coming to them. Anyone disagree? No?
No, I think...
Okay. Yeah, they definitely have it coming. All right. So, we'll start off with Ron Paul because, you know, he's just so much fun. Now, I, and many other people who know how to read, I'm perfectly convinced that Ron Paul is a blazing racist. Hardcore racist. Among my various bits of proof of what, you look like you had a question.
No, he seems to distance himself a little bit from his chief of staff, the guy who really was the
Well, of course he distances himself
racist.
because it hurts now.
Well, we're going to get into that.
Back when he did it, it didn't hurt. Back in the 80s, it was okay to be a racist. It's not okay anymore.
That's so strange.
Well, more importantly, when you're only thinking about your tiny little congressional district in a very racist place in Texas, and you don't think you're going to go anywhere else, then it's very safe to say things that are extremely racist.
No, but it's weird. People who don't really know him that well, he comes off as kind of like a slightly
affable.
Very affable, but slightly offbeat kind of guy who has these kind of weird beliefs. Like some things you kind of agree with.
Yeah, well, he's gotten very good at keeping it out of the public's eye.
But he's very good at disguising his racism, if that is indeed his true beliefs at the moment.
Oh, well,
I mean, he really
you know what? If it wasn't his true belief anymore, he would have said, you know what? I used to think like that, and I was wrong. Because it would have been much better for him.
Yeah.
Than to just keep doing what we're doing. All right. What we're talking about here is the Ron Paul newsletter, which he's been putting out for decades. Okay? And...
especially during its years as the Ron Paul Survival Report.
Yeah, exactly. He's also one of those. Anytime now, the collapse of civilization by heritage seeds.
The race war is coming.
Exactly. So, among the several things that he had to say in these newsletters that had his name on it, mind you, stuff like how to gun down an urban youth. Now, I'm reading this off of Mother Jones, who highlighted like the top 10 crazy things. From the Ron Paul Political Report, October 1992. If you live in a major city, you've probably heard about the newest threat to your life and limb and your family. Carjacking. It's the hip-hop thing to do among the urban youth who play unsuspecting whites like pianos.
Because white people never carjacked anyone or stole cars. Right, Daryl Iser?
The youth simply walks up to a car they like, pull a gun, tell the family to get out, steal their jewelry and wallets, and take the car to wreck. Such actions have ballooned in recent months. Okay, that's bad enough. But then they tell you how to deal with it. What can you do? More and more Americans are carrying a gun in the car. An ex-cop I know advises that if you have to use a gun on a youth, you should leave the scene immediately, disposing of the wiped-off gun as soon as possible. Such a gun, of course, cannot be registered to you, but one bought privately.
And make sure
classifieds,
and make sure you kind of shave off the numbers off the gun too. You know,
it's like not only is he telling white people they have to watch out for black people, but how to murder them and get away with it, because the youths, the urban youths, let's see. There's also the one of my personal favorite ones from the Ron Paul Political Report, October 1990. A mob of black demonstrators led by it's in quotes, Reverend Al Sharpton, occupied and closed the Statue of Liberty recently, demanding that New York be renamed Martin Luther King City to reclaim it for our people.
I don't think he ever said that, but what do you do?
I hate to agree with Reverend Al, but maybe a name change is in order. Welfaria, Zooville, Rape Town, Dirtbird, and my favorite, Lazyopolis.
Wow. Rape Town. Nice.
But Al, the Statue of Liberty, next time hold that demonstration at a food stamp bureau or a crack house.
Nice.
Not racist at all.
Nothing racist.
Nothing racist there.
Wow.
Okay.
Nice.
Really, and I mean, there's just, and this went on for decades.
But no, wait. Now, the guy who wrote this is not actually Ron Paul, right? It wasn't like the team.
No,
the
you don't know who wrote it. And this is the thing. And,
it bears Ron Paul's name on the top of the newsletter.
We'll finish up with Ron Paul's newsletters.
I like Rape Town, though. That's a nice little catchy name.
I like Zoopolis. Zoopolis is pretty good.
Oh, awesome.
Okay. Malicious gay spreading AIDS. At the recent World AIDS Conference in Japan, because, Ron Paul also does not like the gay, researchers admitted that what I have long told you. There is no prospect of a cure or vaccine for AIDS.
Mind you, it was 1994, so at the time it seemed pretty bleak.
For one thing, the virus keeps mutating. A drug that might work today won't work tomorrow. Researchers also admitted they've been lying about the incidence of heterosexual AIDS to increase funding for homosexual programs. Those who don't commit sodomy, who don't get a blood transfusion, or who don't swap needles are virtually assured of not getting AIDS unless they're deliberately infected by a malicious gay.
Malicious gays.
Are you a malicious gay?
Yeah, but
Sounds fun.
Yeah, but suppose you do need a blood transfusion. Like, it looks like you're a hemophiliac, like Ryan White was.
Well, no, I mean, they didn't test for it originally.
Open heart surgery, God forbid, anything like that.
But still, malicious gay.
The malicious
You're
gay.
a delicious gay. You're not malicious. You're delicious.
I know. If only I could be a malicious gay. That would be so much more fun.
Yeah, well, these little problems. And of course...
To complicate the fact, there is some people out there back in the day who really, they knew they had AIDS and they didn't give a damn. They're going to go around and have sex with tons of dudes. And I'm fine. Nothing wrong with me. Meanwhile, you have, herpes, crystocoma, and all this kind of happen. Yeah, a lot of guys were kind of sociopathic in a way with the way they were dealing with themselves and didn't give a shit about, infecting other gay people.
Yeah, that's not what they're talking about, though.
Yeah.
That's really not what they're talking
Every gay is a malicious gay by definition. If if you have gay sex, you deserve to have AIDS because you're a malicious gay. That's basically what they're saying.
Which is funny because I actually just wrote an article about that today because they're talking about, they're this close to a cure for AIDS, or for HIV. Well, presumably AIDS as well. But, the entire article is about the fact that if they actually come up with a cure for AIDS, the first people who will be absolutely appalled by this will be the religious right.
Well, if they come up with it, because they're also talking about a possible vaccine for herpes. This is a vaccine for herpes and AIDS. I'm having sex with everybody.
Well, there you go.
That's gonna be a malicious gay.
Overnight. You're a malicious gay. But no, I mean the whole point.
Honestly, God, it'll be like fall of Rome in the village.
I'm gonna start having sex with women just
the Castro. Forget it.
But the real problem is that the religious right would absolutely freak out over it because they like the idea of having sexually transmitted diseases to dissuade people from having sex.
I think herpes is so much scarier than AIDS.
Why?
Because you have to live with herpes.
Oh well, yeah.
It's just like...
Stupid.
He's a malicious gay. Don't worry.
You're a malicious gay. Don't listen to the malicious gay.
He's a malicious gay.
Welfare checks ended the 1992 Los Angeles riots. From the Ron Paul Political Newsletter, June 1992. You know what? I thought this was all in the 80s. I forgot it reached into the 90s as well.
Yeah, sure.
Order was only restored in L.A. when it came time for the blacks, to get their welfare checks 3 days after rioting began. What if the checks had never arrived? No doubt the blacks would have fully privatized the welfare state through continued looting. But they were paid off and the violence subsided.
Like, oh snap, I gotta catch my check first. Hold on a second.
Here's another one from...
I don't know him.
Here's another one from a 1992 newsletter.
I'm the racist.
Opinion polls consistently show that only about 5% of blacks have sensible political opinions, i.e. support the free market, individual liberty, the end of welfare, and affirmative action. Given the inefficiencies of what D.C. laughingly calls the criminal justice system, I think we could safely assume that 95% of the black males in that city are semi-criminal or entirely criminal.
95%.
95%. Wow. We are constantly told that it is evil to be afraid of black men, but it is hardly irrational. Black men commit murders, rapes, robberies, muggings, and burglaries, all out of proportion to their numbers.
Wow, that's just straight up racist right there. I can't even joke like. Yeah. Like before I was cracking a joke, it's like, oh,
it's damn. Like, wow, it's just George dropping to be racist.
95%. Like, yeah, every black person, every black guy is a criminal. Yeah. By definition.
These are newsletters that had Ron Paul's name on it.
Yeah.
He made about $1 million a year off of this newsletter because you had to pay to get it. You didn't get it for free.
And anytime someone asks him about it, he gets all pissy and like, oh, this interview's over. He pulls off the microphone, walks away, like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about.
They were also connected to when he was in office as a congressman. Now, during part of that time, he wasn't a congressman. I don't remember.
Right. He retired, or I don't know if he lost or he just stopped running.
I think he stopped running.
But
he
you got the
retired and then he came back a few years later.
But you definitely got the impression that the mailing list was the same as his congressional mailing list. And he was saying, still calling himself the Honorable Ron Paul during that period.
No, because when you leave office, sometimes you can still carry.
So
the
now,
title.
the excuse is that he wasn't actually running the business hands-on, and he wasn't. Now, the entire newsletter.
Yeah, but your name is on it.
The newsletter's written from the first person's perspective. It's written from his perspective. There are no names for the articles. Like, the writers aren't listed. Like, or such and such wrote this article. Such.
Okay.
There's no writers.
No bylines, basically.
Yeah. There's no. Sorry. Yes. Thank you. There's no bylines. The conceit of the newsletter is that it's all written by Ron Paul, straight from him, straight to you. So, for him to turn around and say that he didn't know anything about it is either he's lying or phenomenally incompetent in running a business.
Right. And then, this...
Or naive to the point of, like, shocking. Shockingly
this
naive.
This is the number one thing that libertarians cannot wiggle out of.
And they get really upset when you discuss it, and they don't want to talk about it.
Either he wrote them, or he's incompetent. It's one or the other. Because if you're letting stuff go... Anybody who runs a business...
Well, no, he didn't have to write them. He knew about them. He either wrote them, he knew about them,
he had to have known about them. At the very least.
Those are the three choices. He either
either he had to know about it, or he's incompetent. Because if he didn't know about it, libertarians are always priding themselves on all this business nonsense, right? We're all the business-minded people. We love business. We're all about business. You can't run a business like that. If you're running a business and stuff is going on that you have no idea is going on, you're a bad businessman. And libertarians supposedly would never vote for a bad businessman. But they love Ron Paul. So which is it? Did he know what was in the newsletters and therefore he is a racist? Or did he not know about the newsletters, in which case he's incompetent?
Now, when they say, oh, well, he didn't run that business at the time. Now... This didn't go on for like 1 or 2 years. This went on for several years. Okay, and
they always try to make it sound like it was one newsletter.
They always try to narrow it down.
One random.
It was one newsletter. No, it wasn't.
And I've discussed this before, but over the course of several years, to think that nobody in his life would have come up to him and said, "I got your newsletter today. You're right about them damn blacks," and for him to be like,
or maybe to be fair, at least one guy. This is kind of racist, don't you think? A little bit.
Here's the point I always make, is that there's a guy I went to college with who's now my state senator. There's a guy I've known for like 20 years who was friends with me in Gay and Lesbian Youth of New York, who's now a city councilman.
Is he a malicious gay?
No, he's a nutritious gay.
Oh, okay.
He's all kinds of happy on the city council. And there's an old buddy of mine who I used to work in the fraternity. We used to work together, and now he's a state legislator in Maryland.
Yeah.
And
I don't know anybody important.
All three of them send me their stuff. Like, even though I'm not in the districts of the city councilman, and obviously I'm not in Maryland, I get their stuff. I get their newsletters. Now, being that they're old friends of mine, if I saw something in their newsletter that I thought was crazy, or I thought that was bad for their image, or shouldn't be going out under their name, what's the first thing I would do? I'd pick up the telephone.
All right.
And I would call them up. And you're going to tell me that Ron Paul, being as old as he was, and being in this was in his hometown, he didn't have any friends who would call him up and be like, dude, your newsletter's racist. Is this really what you believe in? Either A, all his friends thought this is exactly what he believes, or B, they would have been calling him up and saying, hey, this doesn't belong in here. What are you doing?
Even if they all thought that was exactly what he believed, at least one point or another, one of them called up and said, yeah, that's what we're talking about. Lazy-topia. That's some funny stuff, Ron. You know about the black people. And
you use the word black people as opposed to N-words, which I'm sure spewed freely from the lips.
Certainly, if your friends didn't agree with it, they'd be calling you up and saying, oh my God, what is going on in your newsletter? That's what happened if...
At a minimum, they would say, hey, I agree with you, Ron.
Yeah, one way. There's no way no one told him. You know, it's not like he was the king and they were afraid of being executed.
Yeah.
You know, it's like...
If you're a congressman, your friends read your newsletter, and they tell you about it.
Or at least police like, hey, Ron, I agree with everything you say, but you might want to tone it down just a little bit, you know? Don't use the word N-word so often, you know?
This is the 90s. You can't get away with that anymore.
Not bad stuff, you know.
You know, so the whole idea that he didn't know about it is, like, preposterous.
How do you not know?
So either he's a hardcore racist, or he profits off of hardcore racism, which is just as bad. Because if you're that cynical that you would use hardcore racism to profit yourself that way, then you know what? I would rather have a David Duke who's at least honest about his racism.
By the way, the newsletter supported David Duke's.
Yes, I was going to actually mention that, but he beat me to it. David Duke being, what was he, a Grand Wizard of the KKK?
An Imperial Wizard of the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan back
in the
80s. Or actually, yeah.
And he was openly Klan.
Yeah.
Oh no, David Duke, he wore that as a badge of honor.
Yeah, he did not. He was not ashamed of that. So if you're gonna be, I would rather have you be openly be like, yes, I am a goddamn KKK member than pretend.
David Duke would have won had it not been for his KKK credentials. A lot of people down there liked him, thought he was smart, and he was saying a lot of things. He
loves all the racist ideas.
Those people in Louisiana, seriously, I'm not kidding. He was polling really well back when he was running for, I think, governor of Louisiana. And the only thing that held him back was his history. Was like, oh, geez, you know,
it's a bit much. It's a bit much. It's like, I like the racism, but I don't know if I can actually.
It's okay to call black people lazy as long as you don't actually wear a Klan hood.
Yes, I think Dave Duke would have won. I honestly believe Dave Duke would have won that election.
He didn't. Darn. So that's Ron Paul. Now, this is the same Ron Paul that libertarians have been, slobbing over for decades. And now that he's retired,
it's really a cult,
he's the most wonderful.
He is.
Like the Ron Paul group was really a cult of Ron Paul. He
never.
It's
still a cult.
Well, it's ridiculous.
But he never broke out of that 10% electorate, even when he was running against Mitt Romney.
Yeah,
he never broke out of that hardcore group. They had passion for him, but he was never popular.
The libertarians, all of the self-described libertarians, always loved him and never bothered to think about what Justin and I just said. Either he's incompetent or racist. One of the other.
Or they don't care.
Right.
And that's really what it comes down to. They don't care. But we'll get to that in a little bit. We're not done with libertarians. We're still picking on Ron Paul. We're going to get to libertarians. Ron Paul has decided to start a think tank.
Well, wait a second. Before we move on to the think tank, we should explain Lou Rockwell.
Yes. The guy.
Well, I was gonna tell let's discuss the think tank real quick and Lou Rockwell being on it.
All right.
So Ron Paul's new think tank is the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity. He might as well have called it No War Pot, because, I mean, that's all his real attraction is for libertarians. Now, this is going to be basically a libertarian think tank that's just going to spew out all sorts of justifications for libertarian ideals.
So you don't have to say, I hate black people out loud.
Yeah, exactly. They'll come up with all sorts of ways to dog whistles and hide what they really want. This is how the right wing works to begin with. I mean, I guess any think tank works this way, but the right wing really, really specializes in doublespeak. I mean, peace and prosperity. Prosperity for who? Rich people. Ain't prosperity for anybody else.
No, you can't argue with peace and prosperity. It's like, okay.
Peace and prosperity.
What? Institute? I'm against both. Like, no.
Now, among the people that are in this is Lou Rockwell. And who is Lou Rockwell?
Glenn, take it away.
Well, a lot of people who were trying to defend Ron Paul about the whole newsletter thing said, well, Ron Paul wasn't really behind the newsletters because his chief of staff part of the time when he was in Congress and the guy who was listed as the editor on a lot of the newsletters was this guy, Lou Rockwell. And so a lot of people said, oh, it's really Lou Rockwell. And there were a lot of people who say that the newsletters were probably actually written by Lou Rockwell. So this is one of the excuses given for why this really wasn't Ron Paul.
Blame it on Lou.
Now, how that gets Ron Paul out of being incompetent, I don't know.
It doesn't, but hey. Yeah.
If it's true that supposedly that Lou Rockwell wrote all these newsletters, then you really have to also look at how that indicts, because Lew Rockwell was definitely involved with the newsletters.
Hmm.
His name was all over them. It's a further indictment of the entire libertarian movement. Because I don't know about you guys, but any friends of mine that I've ever had that are libertarians will constantly post on their Facebook page things from the Ludwig von Mises Institute. And they will talk all about...
which Lew Rockwell is a...
He is the executive director and founder of it.
There you go.
Well, von Mises is an Austrian economist whose views were kind of like, you know, very in favor of austerity.
Yeah, supposedly...
There's more to it.
Shocking.
Supposedly it's the Austrian School of Economics, but the institute is in the south somewhere. I think it's in Georgia. It's somewhere in the deep south. And Austrians don't actually practice this Austrian economics that everybody's always... It's the Austrian school, except Austrians have socialized healthcare. Austrians don't practice Austrian economics. So the von Mises Institute is really Southern Confederate thinking.
The two dudes.
Neo-Confederates.
Yeah, they're really, you know...
The South will rise again!
There's nothing European about this. If you try and wrap it in Napoleon, it doesn't make it, you know, put some nice icing on it and wrap it in flaky pastry, it doesn't make it European. But, so Lew Rockwell is deeply involved with these newsletters also. And you would also think that if supposedly, you know, Lew Rockwell was the bad guy who was involved with all this horrible stuff, and if he was
the real racist behind those newsletters.
If he was the real racist behind those newsletters, you would think Ron Paul would want to distance himself as far as he possibly could.
Oh, they fired the guy, right?
And at some point in 2008, he supposedly distanced himself from him a little bit.
Yeah, he took a step away and said, "Hey, I'll see you later, man."
Yeah, I'll be out. Thanks for all the work.
I'll meet you at that. I'll meet you later at the barbecue.
Yeah, all right.
Lew Rockwell still had the little heart running around his head in his von Mises Institute stuff for Ron Paul. But regardless, now in the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity, guess who's right next to Ron Paul again?
Dun dun dun!
Lew Rockwell.
Oh my goodness. It's almost like Ron Paul is embracing the racist ideas of Lew Rockwell.
So when people keep saying, oh, that was back then, all the same people are still involved. And all of the same, you know, nobody has...
Now, to be fair, conservatives are dumb enough that they fell for the Tea Party, who was all the same Republicans who just said they were now Tea Party instead of Republicans. You know, how that worked was unclear, but, you know,
well, the bizarre thing about the Tea Party was the Tea Party started out being all the libertarian folks, and then all of the social conservatives said, we're the Tea Party too! And then, you know, like, they all became the Tea Party, and it just basically was anybody who was hard right.
Anyone
who was embarrassed to be Republican.
Or anyone who was a fan of Glenn Beck.
They would say that they were independents.
Right.
But meanwhile, they believed in all the most hardcore right-wing nonsense and not.
And we're going to get to the libertarians about that in a little bit. So now, also along with Lew Rockwell, we've got this is from an article from the Daily Beast. We have Walter
by the way,
Block.
Read this article.
Yeah, I have to put the link for it.
What's the author's name? Do you have that?
The Daily Beast, James Kirchick.
Yeah.
Kirchick.
Read the Kirchick article. Awesome.
Yes. It lays it all out. And one of the things it lays out is Walter Block, an anarcho-capitalist, I'm sure I mispronounced that, professor of economics and fellow at the Mises Institute. Like many in Rockwell's Neo-Confederate circle, Block believes that the wrong side won the war against Southern secession and blames most of America's current problems on the monster Lincoln.
That monster Abraham Lincoln.
Yes. Let's see. Also on Paul's board are prominent former government officials who claim that American Jews constitute a fifth column aimed at subverting American foreign policy in the interests of Israel. Michael Schur, a former CIA intelligence officer, has used this precise phrase, alleging that a long list of individuals, organizations, and publications are intent on involving 300 million Americans in other people's religious wars. Now, those are the people, when they start bitching about Israel, they tend to go into anti-Semitism. I mean, I do get those on my page occasionally. You know, I mean, I have a bunch of people who are against Israel, but are not anti-Semites. They don't care that they're Jewish. They just care that we're getting involved in Israel's shit when we don't really need to be getting involved as we are.
I think there's some legitimate room for criticism of Israeli policy.
Exactly, and people
you criticize Israel without being anti-Semitic.
Right.
Exactly.
When you start saying Jews are a fifth column.
Yeah, exactly. The Jews this, the Jews that. It's just
those
like
beady-eyed bastards. Yeah,
it's like no. You got to separate Jews from Israelis. There's a difference there. I'm Jewish. I am not Israeli. Oh, it's a Jewish state. I am not Israeli. I don't care what they say. I happen to be
I know
Jew.
a lot of religious Jews who will tell you they're not Israeli.
Yeah, exactly. I'm an atheist Jew, and I don't consider myself Israeli in the slightest bit. I might visit someday when they stop getting bombed, but I'm not going until then. But still, so now you've got anti-Semites and you've got Neo-Confederates and let's see, anyone else on there that I should mention?
Nazis? No.
No, that's the Koch brothers. That's a different think tank. So this is going to be Ron Paul's think tank. It's going to be filled with lots of loony wackaloons, anti-government conspiracy nuts. Basically the Alex Jones crowd. Except more racist.
Right.
Yeah, they've got 9/11 truthers in there.
I'm sure that birthers in there too. Of course, they have.
Well, I'm sure they're all birthers to one degree or another.
The whole smorgasbord of hate.
Now, and this is his think tank that he put together because unless he isn't involved with the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity,
which he might claim at some point in the future.
Yeah, if he lives long enough, it's like I didn't have anything to do with these guys.
Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity.
And the big question is how involved Rand Paul is going to be.
There's the number one.
That's going to be an important question.
They positioned Rand Paul as supposedly the guy who's going to take up the banner, and Now here's the bizarre thing about libertarians, right? Is that even with Rand Paul, they talk about how wonderful Rand Paul is. But when Rand Paul talks Kentucky. Rand Paul is in favor of all of those social prohibitions the people of Kentucky want.
Abortion.
Rand Paul is not going to come out and say, we should teach evolution in school because creationism is a bad idea.
Nope. Yeah, he won't discuss how old the Earth is. He'll just completely dodge that. Because he doesn't want to offend his base.
Right.
But if he was a real libertarian, he'd be like, you know what, those are my principles, that's what I believe in. Doesn't matter if you guys don't like it, it is what it is. The free market, the free market.
Yeah, but at least for Ron Paul, I mean, again, I'm not really saying I love Ron Paul, but at least he was willing to be unpopular. At least he was willing to say things that
he knew he had a base. He knew he had a base that would never, ever let him go.
No, but you need to expand your base if you're going to be successful.
Ron Paul never had to hold a Senate seat.
Right, but Ron Paul never really tried to pander to anybody, which is again, I'm not saying that his views are smart or wise.
He didn't have to.
Right, but you're not listening to what I'm saying. Ron Paul never had to hold a Senate seat. Yeah. Rand Paul has to hold the Kentucky Senate seat. And the beautiful thing about that is he's going to constantly show off what a hypocrite he is. Because he's going to say things to pander to Kentucky that are completely in violation of everything the libertarians say they believe in. And now he's going to have to decide, is he going to embrace the Ron Paul think tank or is he going to go against the Ron Paul think tank? And either one of those things is going to be disastrous for him. So the good news about this recent silliness is that it's going to put a huge hole in Rand Paul's aspirations to prove himself to be the ultimate libertarian possible presidential candidate.
Well, it's going to be funny because the libertarians won't care about anything he says as long as he's got Paul in his last name.
Yeah.
They won't care. Everyone else outside of it that's not like a hardcore Ron Paul fan, they're not a Paul bot. Everyone else that says, I'm a libertarian, but not necessarily a Paul bot, they're going to be like, hey, so you wouldn't mind a drone blowing away a guy robbing a liquor store, huh? What's up with that?
Yeah, he backed off that too. Like,
no, that's not what I said.
No.
Except that's exactly what he said.
Yeah.
I mean, I understood what he was saying, but he did say it. I don't care if a cop or a drone blows the guy away. Well, obviously you don't really care if a drone does it then, do you?
You take a principle stand, you do a filibuster, and only to step over all that.
That's because the filibuster was a
The difference
stunt.
is the police officer will try to arrest someone, not just kill them.
Well, it depends. If he's a lazy black person.
Well,
Oh, how lazy can he be? He's probably liquor store.
Average.
That's true. Yeah, he's got some motivation.
The average
it takes
cop will try to
motivation
arrest someone.
Now, aside from Ron Paul's social policies, which are disgusting in and of themselves, his economic policies are ridiculous as well. You know, he wants to end the Fed and go back to gold and blah, blah, blah. And now, strangely enough, the recent banking scandals, which are just getting larger and larger and larger as they peel back layer after layer of corruption, they would manipulate the price of gold however the hell they want. So even if you go to the gold standard, it wouldn't make a difference because it's still completely manipulable to the banks and you know, to the powers that be. Doesn't matter if you have a Fort Knox in your backyard; they can make that worth nothing if they feel like it because they're all in collusion. Literally, the banks are all in collusion.
Basically, money has a value based on what we say the value.
Well, no, and that's what he doesn't want. He wants it to sit to a solid currency, so it can't be changed. And
like
blah, blah, blah.
Pieces of 8, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, little bags of coins.
Except,
you know.
like anything else, that can be manipulated, and the banks have been manipulating all prices on all commodities just because they can. Because they can get away with it, because we can't arrest them and throw them in jail because it might hurt the economy, blah, 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 blah. Too big to fail, too big to jail. You know, and in that particular instance, you know, I'm sure I agree with Ron Paul. The bank should be broken down.
Yes,
but on the other part, he doesn't want government regulation. So as far as he's concerned, this is what the banks should be able to do. Because
I think the bank will break down by themselves. You know,
yeah, exactly.
Like, ask them, could you please dissolve all your power and
yeah, and this is the essential flaw of the libertarian, economic libertarian philosophy. Is the invisible hand of the free market is invisible because it doesn't exist. The free market does not punish anything.
Well, more importantly, there are lots of ways to game the free market, and that was proven, you know, at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century. We had a big backlash against laissez-faire, absolute free capitalism without regulation because we found that it doesn't work.
Exactly.
Because we found out that, you know,
people are greedy.
Like any game, people can cheat at it.
Right. It's human nature,
and
really.
You need regulations to stop people from cheating at the game.
You can't play Monopoly if one person can walk up to the bank and take all of it themselves.
Right. Well,
there has to be rules.
Well, more importantly, before the Great Depression, you had like basically the stock market was like a 3-card Monte scheme. You know, you had people who do all sorts of things to pump up the value of the stock and trying to get everyone to invest like crazy. Meanwhile, they're pulling their money out, and then the stock collapses and all these people get burned. I mean, you know, all the banking laws that were created back in the 1930s were basically put there because of all the really underhanded
right, and these are the exact things that Ron Paul says we shouldn't have because it gets in the way of capitalism and prosperity. Blah, blah, blah,
but
blah, blah,
in
blah,
reality, if you have a free market, right, the free market is supposed to hold prices down and it's supposed to hold profits down, because if you're making too much profit, people will come in and compete with you. And if there's one thing we've seen, even with all the reforms we had in the 20th century that are deteriorating now, but even at their height, we always had situations where people were able to stop other people from coming in and competing with them, not by being the best at what they were doing, but by gaming the system so that they had an unfair access to the market.
Monopolies also.
Yeah. And
monopolies and oligopolies. We managed to stop monopolies. We never managed to stop oligopolies like the gasoline industry.
Thank you, Theodore Roosevelt.
You know, the difference being monopoly is one company owns the entire market. Oligopoly means several companies own it, and they all work together to make sure,
like a mob family.
They make sure no one else can get into it. It's not competitive. It's collusion, which is what the banks are doing. Again, as it brings us back to that, they're not competing; they're colluding.
Also, gas companies they also collude.
Exactly, but gas companies explicitly collude. They make sure, like, if one gas company were to drop their prices, the other gas companies would flip out.
Right.
You know, it's like, no, you can't do that because then everyone will see, hey, how come they're charging us less, blah, blah, blah.
They don't want to have price war.
And that's not, and, you know, if you go back to what capitalism is, that's not supposed to happen. Right. You know, capitalism is, they're supposed to constantly compete with each other instead of constantly collude with each other.
This is one of the reasons the Republicans are currently choking on their own bile when it comes to the internet tax. Half of them don't want it because those companies can compete unfairly, and the other half want it because the company's competing unfairly. They want it to be a more level playing field because their brick and mortar stores constituents are like, hey, you got to help us out.
Exactly.
But then there's the ones who have the internet constituents who's like, no, we don't want that competition. That would be bad for us.
And to be fair, you have some true believers, and then you have charlatans who say they're true believers, but they're really looking to protect a particular segment of their base, basically.
Yeah, and this is the problem with the libertarian economics, is that it's all bunk. That if you actually did what libertarian economics wanted you to do, it would be a fucking disaster.
Well, it'd be shark eat shark, basically. It'd be every man for himself.
Right, and as far as they're concerned, well, the best would rise to the top. Yeah, but they would rise to the top by cheating. They wouldn't rise to the top through their own, sweat and work and grit and moxie.
So it depends what you call work and grit and moxie. I would burn as many people as possible. I can crush them all.
Here's an interesting thing that I bet you haven't heard yet. Did you hear about what's going on with China with baby food?
No, not recently. Oh my
Is that
god!
the one with the glass in it? No,
I almost don't want to know.
Well,
and
Chinese companies have been frequently caught putting melamine in their baby food, like they were putting in the pet food here in the United States when they had the protein additives with the melamine killing pets. It's been constantly found now in baby food in China. And the fascinating thing is a bizarre black market economy has shown up. There are shipping companies here in the United States that are constantly inundated by individual people sending 1 or 2 boxes of baby food to China. First of all, China won't let you send more than 2. So these people come in week after week, buying baby food in America and sending it to China. Now, what are they paying for?
Actual baby food.
What they're paying for is the FDA.
Yeah.
Because the people in China don't trust anything made, and what they say is, even by the same company, even if the same company is making the baby food in China, Chinese people don't trust it, don't want it. They want it to come from America.
Why?
Or Europe, I guess.
Because we have the FDA.
Right.
That's why. Evidence that the American people are getting something of value from their FDA, instead of having to test it individually. Now, if Ron Paul was right, all these Chinese people would be able to, much cheaper, just open up their own lab and test the baby food themselves, right?
Every single time.
Every single time they'd be able to just test it themselves. They wouldn't be... They aren't oppressed by this huge government with this FDA.
Or the companies that were lacing the baby food in the first place would immediately go out of business and be replaced by somebody who was trustworthy.
That's right. If the market works
and
so
people would go to jail.
People wouldn't be able... Well, no, they wouldn't have to go to jail, right? Because if free market capitalism is correct,
punished by being put out of business.
They would be punished by being put out of business,
and no one would want to buy their products again.
So
even if they went to some other business.
According to libertarians, this isn't going on. We're just imagining that all these people are sending baby food to China from America.
Now, and here's one of my favorite things, and I love doing this to libertarians when I argue with them online, because libertarians are completely ignorant of history. Astoundingly ignorant of history.
Most Americans, sadly, are.
Yeah, but if you're going to scream,
absolutely abysmal.
But libertarians swear they're the smartest people in the room, and we're going to get to that in a minute because I'm still not done with libertarians. Where they absolutely swear they're the smartest people in the room, and they know more than everyone else, and they just know this would work, but they're absolutely ignorant of history. When they start talking about how the FDA, we don't need the FDA, you just mention the word adulteration. And then they go, duh, what's that? And then you explain to them that in the late 1800s and early 1900s, actually, yeah, in the early 1900s.
The progressive era.
Yeah, before that.
Before progressivism.
Okay. Before the progressivism.
You were lucky if when you bought your milk, there was only a little urine in it.
Exactly.
Well, actually, no, it was like swill milk. Basically, they add water to milk, and it was like, you're not really getting milk. You're getting kind of like water.
There was urine,
gutter water.
Nobody knows what was in it.
The idea was you bought milk by the gallon. So what do? You thin it out. It's kind of like the same idea what Coke dealers do when they take 1 key of Coke and they turn it into 2 keys of Coke. Okay. And it's the same exact idea.
He knows that because he's Puerto Rican.
So racist. So racist. You just bulk it up when you're selling bread. Yeah, you're selling bread by the pound. You bulk it up with a little bit of sawdust and a little bit of cement mix.
Oh yeah, sawdust and cement in the bread.
It makes it heavier, so you can sell it by the pound. And people were getting sick. Now, you couldn't say for sure what was making you sick. So people didn't really have a choice. You have to eat. And you can't grow your own wheat and make your own bread.
Yeah,
if you live in a
city.
That's a little bit difficult, right?
So you had to rely that these people were not poisoning you. But of course they were, because they could. And they could say they can make more money by putting shit. Sometimes literally.
Unscrupulous people.
Yeah, they put crap into your food, and then you wouldn't have a choice but to eat it. Because what are you going to do?
Right.
You know?
And most people were not even aware that they were being poisoned.
Yeah, they just knew they were getting sick, and they didn't know it was from their food necessarily.
Well, there's always that guy out there, just like there is today, who said, they wouldn't do that. They're people just like you and me.
Right, because the free market would punish them otherwise. But, of course, that's not how it works.
Right.
You know, even once you found out, it's like, all right, I won't do it anymore. But there was no way to check. No, there was no one to look into it. And you can't, you know, like hundreds of thousands of people couldn't test all their food every single time they were going to eat. It's not practical. So then they created the FDA in order to check food and say, yeah, if you do this, we're going to throw your ass in jail. And shockingly, you no longer have to worry about getting urine in your milk or getting cement in your bread. It doesn't happen
or a mouse
anymore.
in a can of beans, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it happens, but it happens by accident. It doesn't happen on design.
The mouse adds value and protein.
Yeah. Now, I mean, again, it's exceedingly rare you have that kind of nightmare. Now, that'd be a public relations disaster. There was actually a dead mouse inside a can of beans, but I mean, back in the day, you know, that kind of thing happened on a routine basis. Oh, we got a bad one. Okay, throw those can of beans away.
Let's remember that we still have to have regulations on how much mice feces can be in a can of tuna.
This is true too. Maggots.
There has to be an
acceptable
acceptable level
of maggots and other types of
people complain about, but because it's not practical to make it 100% clean.
Right.
Because that's still a problem.
Yeah. But honestly, I'll take 99%. You know, I'm sorry.
But it's, I mean, if at the very least it's not enough to get you sick. And when it starts getting you sick, they tend to find out what it is and how it happens. There has to be regulations
about that. Clearly, one of the reasons why there has to be regulations as to how much mouse feces is allowed to be in your tuna is because if that regulation didn't exist, there would be more mouse feces.
Way more mouse feces.
And the only way you would know is if you sat there and picked through your tuna every time you bought it and said, there's too much.
There would be all sorts of stuff like E. coli, forget about it. You'd be eating excrement like on a regular basis. Listeria, salmonella, all sorts of things that the FDA cracks down on. I mean, there's been scandals recently down south in Georgia. You know, peanut companies, peanut butter manufacturers rather, being shut down because they ran a shoddy operation. It was filthy or whatever. Well, they weren't cleaning their instruments properly. Thank God for that. You know, if we didn't have that, forget about it. There'd be an epidemic of food poisonings in this country.
Thank God there's regulations.
Thank God the regulations.
Thank God they're not cleaning their instruments properly.
No, I'm just saying. That's
and the same thing goes for the EPA.
And people take it for granted. They don't realize how important it is.
And the same thing for the EPA. You know, before the EPA, you had the I'm so gonna pronounce this.
Cuyahoga.
There you go, Cuyahoga River in Ohio. It was so polluted and so filthy, it regularly burst into flame. Flaming water. Okay, and not like a little bit of flame, like a flame that would actually catch fire to the buildings near the water and cause like actual buildings to burn down.
Yeah, there's enough benzene and gasoline.
Yeah, this is all the shit they used to dump in the water because they could. You know, because who cares? It's just water. I don't have to drink out of it.
Well, people had the idea that because a river is always running,
it would just
didn't matter what you dumped into it. It would just go somewhere.
Yeah,
and when you only have 300 people, you could do that.
Right.
You could put stuff in the river and it just goes away and you never see it again.
Yeah, the Hudson River in New York State was also a very similar sewer line,
hundreds of thousands of people living in the same city, and you keep doing that, you're going to start discovering that there's pollution that doesn't go away.
It doesn't go away very quickly, and it goes downstream to other people. You know,
and fish and wildlife and everything else.
Yeah, and this is what the EPA stopped. I mean, the
problem is now we've gotten to the point where pollution has gone down because we've had regulations and we've had, all kinds of environmental movements to clean up all of these polluted waterways.
And again, people take it for granted. So
a lot of people our age don't remember that there was ever a problem.
Right.
Right. However, you'll have people who argue that, but there's a modern day example. The Yamuna River in India is so fucking polluted that it foamed. If you see the pictures of it, it's miles and miles and miles of the river being completely covered in about a foot of thick white foam. It looks like snow.
I think it's because you have so many people using that river.
Well, they dump
other like human waste.
They dump 600 million gallons of sewage a year.
Yeah,
into that river.
That's horrifying.
Nice. The pictures, I mean, the pictures are gorgeous. It looks beautiful. Except that you remember that people still drink, bathe, and cook with that water.
And the Ganges is another river that's likewise absolutely abysmal.
Right. And that's because they don't have the EPA. They don't have anything like the EPA. They don't have anything to stop those people, the companies that are dumping the sewage from dumping the sewage. They don't have any way of stopping it.
Apparently, they don't have water filtration systems either.
Or at least nothing even remotely close to what we have. No
reservoirs, I guess. Wow.
You know, so that's a modern day. That's happening right now. This very instant. There is miles and miles, hundreds of miles of that river that cannot support life at all.
Oh,
there's no fish. There's no plant. There's no oxygen in the water. You can still drink it. I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah, you get dysentery real quick.
You know, and this is not a small river either. We're talking like, you know, it's a big ass wide river. And this is what happens when there's no EPA. Right. You know, so when you hear Ron Paul going, "We don't need the EPA," it's like, yeah, it's because you're going to be drinking bottled water. Which, of course, even then, without an FDA, you can drink all the bottled water you want. It's still going to have piss in it.
Well, what they do with that regulation is they'll just take it out of the polluted river and put it in a bottle and tell you it's clean.
Exactly. And then when you get sick, you won't be able to say where it came from. You won't know.
And because there'll be 15 other things you ate that day infected with
likewise poisonous, right?
And now this brings us to libertarians. Now, I listened to another podcast, the Bob and Chez Show, which is my favorite podcast. And Chez Pazienza pointed out that he was saying this about the Alex Jones conspiracy nut people, but it also applies to libertarians.
Well, a lot of them are Ron Paul people.
This is true.
Alex Jones tries to point you to Ron Paul as much as possible.
I'm sure they have a lot of the same people who listen to both guys. You know.
So what he said is that these people are the perfect cross-section, the perfect confluence of arrogance and stupidity.
Which should not go together.
It really shouldn't. They are absolutely convinced.
George W. Bush, so
they're absolutely convinced that they're the smartest people in the room. At the same time, they are absolutely the worst informed people that you can find. You know, and one of the things that annoys me the most about libertarians, and just really pisses me off about them, is that almost always, with so few exceptions, they are male, they are white, and they're middle class.
And they're older, and they're an older crowd, too.
Yeah, they tend to be a little bit older. They tend to be a little bit more established. You don't find 18-year-olds claiming to be libertarians unless they're more...
There's a lot of college kids.
Well, no, because they think they're libertarians. Because they think they hear pot, and they go, yeah!
They're all the breakers in the Dark Tower.
No,
if you've read The Dark Tower, the breakers are all libertarians.
You're right, though. Because Ron Paul says, the war on drugs is a failure, and all these stoners go, yeah, legalize pot.
Right. You know. It's like, no war, more pot. I'm for Ron Paul. And they stop listening. They go, la, 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 la. I heard what I wanted to hear, and I don't care about anything else.
And they're wearing their Che Guevara t-shirts. You know?
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, and these people I find to be particularly offensive. Because, I mean, it's one thing for conservatives to, you know, they go blah, 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 blah. But they generally don't try to impress you with how incredibly smart they are and how incredibly successful they are and how they got ahead all on their own. Libertarians are absolutely convinced that if you drop them in the middle of the jungle, they would still pull themselves up by the bootstraps and be successful. You know, it's just like, you know what? Fuck you. Fuck you, and fuck your middle-class white family that supported your ass, got you the education, or upper class, got you the education, you had all the nice perks of being a white person in the suburbs. You know, it's like you didn't earn shit. Yeah, you went to school. Well, who paid for it? Oh, I took out a loan. Nice for you. If you've been a poor black kid, you wouldn't have gotten that loan. If you've been a poor black kid, you might not even gotten out of high school without getting arrested a few times. You would have had a record just for being black. You know, and they don't want to hear that part.
And if you did get a loan, you probably got it with the help of the federal government.
Yeah, and if your mommy and daddy signed off on it.
If you got a mortgage, you probably got that with the help of the federal government that you're against.
And you're probably paying higher interest too, by the way. You know, a lot of
these people were born on second or third base, and they really think they just whacked that ball and got their all on their own. It's like, no, you got dropped off by mom's minivan.
But they don't realize that. Again, they take it for granted. You know.
Well, that's the stupidity part. You know, I mean, it's arrogance and stupidity. They're so convinced that they're superior. And, you know, according to Glenn, most of them tend to be, you know, of high intelligence. And that's nice for them because they think that somehow it's like, well, I'm smart, so obviously I can succeed. It's like there's plenty of poor people who are smart, too. They don't get anywhere near those chances.
You know, I think really that's one of the most deliberately immoral things about libertarians is that most libertarians are people who think of themselves, either are or think of themselves as above average IQ. And they, you know, let's face it, we know enough about IQ to know you don't earn your IQ. There are things you could do to keep it up, you know, but you definitely don't earn it. It's definitely something that happens mostly without your doing. And they're more than happy to live in a world that you know, says janitors get paid shit and janitors don't have to have a living wage. But, you know, if you're involved in an industry that requires your intellect, then you should be paid all kinds of money and you should be making, you know, there should be no cap on how much you make. And, you know, that's how they see the world, is that they believe that they want a system, you know, libertarianism.
They want a system that benefits them.
Right. Libertarianism is a system that is going to give them infinite wealth, and it's going to keep down people who aren't as smart as they are. Even though they did, you know, and they will continue to pretend to believe that their intellect is something that they earned, which it isn't, and that somehow people who aren't as smart as they are, who might be, you know, cleaning ladies or janitors and things like that, you know, those people like deserve it because, you know, they did something that made them stupid. Although everybody knows they didn't do anything that made them stupid.
Yeah, and that's the arrogance. You know, it's like, I'm entitled to the fruits of my labor, even though I had all this help in getting there. But they'll never admit that.
Right.
You know, and of course the question...
I mean, are they not entitled to the benefits of their labor is... Because
right, but they don't think. But they don't think they should have. They don't think they should have to give back to the system.
Okay, but I mean,
the fact is, they got to where they are. If you could point to 1,000 things that they got to where they are because they got help from the federal government.
Yeah, but they'll argue, hey, that's not my fault. I didn't create the system. I just play within the rules that are established.
Exactly.
Good.
But at the same time, don't complain about it.
Move to Somalia.
If you're benefiting from the system. And you know that you've grown up and you've gotten where you are because of the system that you no longer decide you like. Well, too bad. You got where you are because of that system. You don't get to turn around later and say, "Hey, thanks. Now go fuck off."
You'll have people who say, "Well, hey, man, just because I was born white doesn't mean I was born with any kind of privilege. I don't feel privileged."
Yeah, that's the problem, though. That's the problem with white
privilege.
People
who have white privilege are unaware.
Where people who have white privilege have no clue they have white privilege, and that's one of my favorite arguments to have with them. You know, it's like, okay, so if you were a poor black kid in the ghetto,
or a poor white kid for that matter, you know,
there's a difference between
poor white and poor black. If you're a poor black kid in the ghetto, the ghettos of middle of Chicago, in the shittiest areas of Chicago, would you be where you are right now? Well, sometimes no. Would you have been where you are right now? Would you have had the opportunities? Would you have had the jobs you've gotten? Would you have gotten the pay you've gotten if you were a poor kid in the inner city?
And most of these people will probably say no.
Well, think about this. What about this?
If they're honest, they'll say
one
no.
of the studies that they cited in Freakonomics, in the documentary Freakonomics, one of the things they were talking about is how if you send out resumes with the same exact qualifications on them, and you put a historically black name versus a historically white name on the resume, the white name will get hired and the black name will not.
Well, a woman just did that recently. Like, she literally, in the last couple of weeks, she kept not getting job applications. She kept not getting job, she kept, sending her resumes, reject. So she changed her name. Well, she didn't change her name, but she wrote a different name, that was less ethnic, and, said that she was white, and the job offers poured in.
Yeah.
And that's white privilege.
That's white privilege.
That is white privilege because you don't think you got that job because you're white, but you did. You absolutely did. So that whole, and it's like, I'm an island unto myself. I could have, I could have gotten to where I am from no matter any position I started off in.
That's bullshit.
Bullshit. If I dropped you off on the streets of frickin' Calcutta, you would be dead within like a day or two. Because you wouldn't know anything.
And
you
the
wouldn't.
poor Indian people would laugh at you.
Yeah, you wouldn't know how to survive in that
Actually, you know what the sad thing is? The poor Indian people would probably give them food.
Yeah, that's true. They'd be like, "Oh, look at this poor bastard."
They would probably.
Well, for nothing. We're nice. Well, not nice.
They would probably split the last bean they have with that guy. Even though in the reverse
and libertarians like to pretend it's like, oh well, objectivism isn't all about greed. It's not about this. It's about blah 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 blah. And it's like bullshit. You're a self-centered, greedy little bastard, which is why I don't want to pay taxes. Why should I have to pay taxes? Because that got you all the things that got you where you are now. You drank your baby milk and you didn't die. You ate your baby food and you didn't die. Your house wasn't burnt to the ground and you didn't die.
You don't have to
your
have
house was burning. There was a fireman to protect you.
And you don't have to have like bodyguards following you around because there's actual police officers on the job. You know?
Right.
When your parents drove to the hospital so you could be born, they had roads to drive on,
and they had a car that was safe with seatbelts and airbags.
And you didn't have to bribe the doctor to do his job. You know.
Yeah, exactly.
Pirates couldn't hold up your parents and threaten to kill you in the womb if they didn't give them all their money because there were police officers around to protect you.
It's all these little benefits that you like to pretend you could have gotten by without all on your own. I didn't need those things. I could have done it all on my own. It's like, no, you really couldn't have.
No, but I think a lot of these libertarians also people feel that all their hard-earned taxpayer dollars are being funneled into the pockets of poor people who are, probably minority, probably people they think that, are lazy, shiftless people, and that's what they think about when they're paying their taxes. Oh, I'm sick of paying for these people.
And of course, they always assume that they're black.
Yes,
and that's why they all love Ron Paul, because they don't care that he's a racist, because generally they tend to be racist.
Deep down inside,
that's their audience.
People are black.
This is why most libertarians are white. The majority of libertarians are white because black people know that they didn't get where they are on their own. They know they didn't get all the little privileges and perks of being a white person. They actually had to rely on some of society, not shooting them on sight, for being black. It's a crime being black while walking in New York City. It's a crime these days. You get pulled over by the cops just for walking down the street and being a 19-year-old black guy. It's like, what did I do?
I still remember the guy when that guy went crazy in California and he was shooting police officers.
Oh, Dorn, whatever his name was.
And the guy had a shirt on. Please don't shoot me. I'm not. What's his face?
Nah.
Because he knew, just being black and looking a little bit like that guy, he knew that they were going to just shoot him without.
I haven't said bald black guy. I'm not this.
Yeah, frankly, I'm surprised black people didn't walk around like this.
Right?
They didn't walk around like this for the entire time. It's like, do not shoot me. I'm not him. Please, thank you.
Right.
And you don't have to worry about that when you're white. No one ever says, I'm looking for a white suspect. You might be him. And say, we didn't say, hey, we're looking for a 19-year-old black guy. That's the entire description you're going to get.
Yeah, but of course, sadly enough, a lot of the descriptions of perps or whatever happen to black people too. So it's not quite as cut and dry. I mean,
and white people think all black people look alike.
No, I'm just saying though, it's unfortunate. I think a lot of
but the cops, it's like, oh, male suspect, 19 to 20 years of age, black. And that could be anything.
Yeah,
but they just leave it as vague as humanly possible.
If 80% of those descriptions could come out.
But how tall is he? Heavy? Yeah. They just give generic descriptions, and then you can pull over anybody and harass them. They don't do that to white people, though. I've never gotten pulled over. I've never gotten questioned by a cop.
Yeah, never.
Never in my entire life have I ever been questioned by a cop. I got caught jumping a turnstile once, but that's different.
You jumped a turnstile?
I know. It was very libertarian of me. I didn't think I should have to pay for it. I was young and stupid. I am. Well, I am Puerto Rican. I'm Puerto Rican. Well, you can't.
Well, you also.
You wouldn't jump it. You roll. You would roll over the turnstile.
Actually, I can still get over a turnstile if I wanted to. But.
I would be impressed to see that. That would be pretty funny to watch.
Why do you blame the Puerto Rican side? What about the Jewish side of you?
No, Jewish side. I would have pitched the Puerto.
Racist.
Yeah, I'm my own racist. I'm a racist against myself. You should see the arguments I have when I'm sleeping. And all right, we're gonna wrap.
The side of him keeps trying to move away from the Puerto Rican side of him.
Yeah, it's terrible. I have my own problem with white flight. All right, we're gonna wrap this up for tonight. So this was the This was the anti-libertarian podcast.
the whole podcast.
Heat
Yes.
on the
One topic.
Libertarians because they need it badly.
Yeah, they really do need to get slapped around because they really just the arrogance plus stupidity equals libertarians, and they're so full of themselves, so incredibly full of themselves. It's just so much fun knocking them down a peg.
It's like a mix of guys who are like really arrogant, and then a lot of clueless people who just like to smoke pot and don't know any better. You know,
They think they're libertarians until they actually hear a little bit more about it. Then they're like, oh, no.
Wait, what? Black people do what?
Yeah,
wait a
it's
minute.
like, no, that's I don't believe that. You know, it's a liberal libertarians aren't really libertarians.
They're just
Or
stoners.
they're not really liberals.
They're just stoners. That's all.
and honestly, most libertarians, when they talk about being libertarians, they're really saying they're Republicans. They just don't want to say they're Republicans because they want to pretend that they're smart enough to be above the two-party paradigm.
Yeah, I always think it's hilarious that they talk about they want to be above the two-party paradigm,
but they only vote for Republicans.
Right, both parties are just as bad. They're both wrong. You got to get off that two-party system, and then of course they'll always vote for the Republicans.
No, but then you have
they'll vote right against those gay rights every time. They'll sit there and say, "Oh, I'm all in favor of gay people."
No, but you do
and
have.
then they'll vote against any gay rights ever.
No, but you do have like genuinely thoughtful libertarians who believe in stuff like euthanasia, for example, or they believe in legalizing drugs.
It doesn't affect them.
Well, no, it does affect them. We're all going to die. They do believe in gay marriage, for example. I mean,
Rand Paul believes in no marriage. That's his out. I don't believe in gay marriage, so I just don't believe in any marriage.
I don't think libertarianism is all bad either. I think there's certain aspects of libertarianism that you really are a true believer that the state shouldn't regulate how people live.
Yeah, but then they always vote for people who do regulate.
Yeah, because they were like Republican. I think
it's a cop out. Libertarianism is a cop out. Libertarianism is just a way of saying I'm not a Republican. Every time I get,
what you tell your gay friends.
Yeah,
when you vote Republican.
I have all these people pop up my page all the time complaining about how, Obama this, Obama that, Obama this, and it's like, oh, so you're a Republican? I never said I was a Republican. I'm an independent, or I'm a libertarian. It's like, well, let me guess. You only vote for Republicans? Or you only vote for Democrats who are really, really super conservative, and you would never vote for Obama because he's a socialist Kenyan Muslim. Well, you don't know anything about me. Then I look through their page, and I'm like, there's Ron Paul, there's Libertarian this,
there's the
Libertarian
Obama as a socialist Kenyan Muslim.
Yeah, it's just like, I had someone last night like that. It's like, I can see all of your likes on your page. Oh, so you think you know me through my Facebook page?
Well,
you think we know you said that yourself.
No, it's a pretty good gauge, not for nothing.
Exactly, it's a very good gauge. And these people are just so full of shit when they say, well, I'm not really a Republican or a Democrat. I vote independently for Republicans. Almost always. So I'm still an independent or libertarian. And it's really just a way because they're embarrassed to be Republicans these days.
No, they just, like I said, they want to tell their gay friends that there's a reason why they keep voting against gay rights.
Yeah, or their black friends if they have any. It's like, I'm not really a racist.
Or their
I just
female
vote
friends.
Republican. Yeah. It's like, I'm not against women. I just vote Republican, but I'm not really against women. Yeah. Dicks. All right, that's it. I'm wrapping it up for the night. This is your host, Justin the Filthy Liberzario, the Mike Marsh.
Mike Marsh.
I had to. It's okay. He's not Mike Marsh. He's not. Mike Marsh is a big douche. And of course, that's my best.
A gay basketball player came out of the closet.
The malicious gay guy.
We'll talk about it next week.
Yeah, he's a malicious gay too.